Hey guys, this is Ken McElroy, and you are listening to the Mailbox Money Show with Bronson Hill.
All right, welcome to the Mailbox Money Show. I am your host, Bronson Hill, and I'm excited. I love talking about things that put money back in your pocket. I love talking about cash flowing investments. And today I've got a friend of mine who's here, Andrew Keel, who is a top mobile home park and manufactured home community designer owner. It owns in 53 different communities in 12 states. And we're going to have a great conversation about mobile home parks. And I think as an investor, whether you are a passive investor, there's some incredible advantages of cash flow, tax benefits, and appreciation over time, I think, that are pretty much unmatched in other types of real estate, especially right now from the cash flow perspective. But also, if you'd like to be an owner, if you'd like to consider buying and operating a mobile home park, what does it take to buy from a mom and pop and not become a mom and pop owner, right? So what does that actually look like? So let's jump in. Andrew, really good to have you with us today. Welcome to the Mailbox Money Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bronson.
Awesome. We were on a panel recently, and I loved what you shared. You had some great data, some great information, just until you're obviously very up to speed on what's happening. But talk to us a little bit about, we can talk a lot about your experience, your background. You've done a lot of different spaces. You have a great reputation. You've got a podcast as well. Let's start out a little bit, just some of the regulations. You kind of brought up just a minute ago that there's mobile home parks. There are some risks that are in the space now. A lot of people are unaware of. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what some of those risks are and how good operators and good investors can mitigate those?
Yeah, good question. I think this is one of the big things right now. It's a hot topic around the space. There's a lot of right of first refusal bills and new regulations around that, giving the tenants the right of first refusal to buy the community from the park owners before they could sell it to an outside third party. And in addition to that, there's other tenant protection laws around the length of a lease you need to give your residents instead of just month-to-month leases, which has kind of been the standard. Now there's new rules around a minimum of 12 months. Some states are a minimum of 24-month leases. And so I think just staying up to date on these new regulations is going to be really important as we move forward because this is a different type of commercial real estate, right? There is a residential aspect to this and a housing aspect to this. And it's important that we take care of this the vulnerable nature of our tenant base and affordable housing, which is desperately needed.
Yeah, so I'm curious. We're newer to the mobile home space. We have a fund we've done recently in the space, and I love it for a lot of reasons, especially because cash flow is so limited in a lot of multifamily, a lot of other types of real estate, a lot of people that own properties that they're not cash flowing anymore. But mobile homes tend to, if you do them right, they tend to cash flow fairly well. Let's talk a little bit about, I mean, can somebody buy a mobile home park and just kind of raise rents however they like? I mean, if it's month to month, I mean, is that kind of what people have been doing? They say, okay, rent for the land itself. Obviously, the individual owners, they're the ones that own the unit. But can you just kind of raise rent like 10% a year every year or 20%? I mean, is there any limit on how much that can be raised in most areas of the country?
Yeah, it depends, right? It's all state by state. But I would say for the most part, the last 10 to 20 years, all of the more landlord-friendly states outside of New York and California, it has been right where it's all it's up to the owner, right? How much they want to raise and how much annually they want to adjust things. But there's been a lot of new regulations, new laws, and incentives for park owners with some of the lenders like the agency lenders, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, to incorporate new tenant protection laws inside of their leases. So it's changing, right? It's ever evolving. But yeah, it has been pretty open in the majority of states up to the park owner how much or how little they want to raise rents. And I think another thing that's important is mobile home parks have been primarily fragmented and owned by a lot of mom and pop owners that haven't kept up with inflation. They haven't raised rents in 20 years. It's very common that we'll talk to owners and they say, hey, we're charging $280 a month and we haven't raised it, since 1994. And that's just when they took it over from their parents, and they've just operated it the same way because they've been, deathly scared of turnover, and they didn't want to have the headaches that come with turnover, and so they just never raised rents. And so I think it's a double-edged sword. We're like, hey, there are some undermarket rents, but then there also have been some we'll say bad operators, right? Bad people that have come in and not added value the right way, where they've just increased rents and not done any improvements. And so, with a vulnerable tenant base, it's just not giving the industry the best view of how things actually are.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. I know there's some people would say, obviously being as passive as you can be is great. And of course, I'm the author of Fire Yourself, which is like, how do you become more passive? But let's just say I'm like, hey, I want to see if I can create something outside of my business or outside of my job. Give me an example of like, if I needed like 10,000 in cash flow per month, what kind of mobile home park would I need to buy? And would that even be like, I mean, is it something that you need an expert to do this? Or is it something that kind of a reasonable person who runs a business could kind of figure out on their own?
That's a good question. I was chatting with someone earlier today about this, and her goal was a little bit less. She just wanted $5,000 a month. And we did the equation on a 35 lot mobile home park that you buy, in the Midwest somewhere. And it's very likely on like a 35 lot park, you could find a 10 cap, type of deal out there. And it's a smaller deal, but if you add value through, filling vacant lots and getting rents up to market, because, there are rents that are well below market, like I mentioned earlier. It is realistic, but for $10,000 a month, if you're going to, put leverage on that and so forth, you would need a pretty considerable chunk. I'd say at least $1 million that you need to bring to the table to put in and, contribute to the deal.
All right, and these are typically, financing, is it usually 30%, 40% down kind of situation, or I'm sure it depends on the lender, but is that generally the going?
Depends on the lender, yeah. There's 25% down is kind of typical with your regional lenders, and then a 20-year amortization, typically a 5-year term, and then rates we're seeing right now are 6 to 7%. It just depends.
So if you brought $1 million to the table, you'd kind of have you'd hope for 3 or 4 million in revenue, and then you'd kind of pull, obviously you'd have financing costs out of that and different things, and then you'd just kind of calculate your returns, and it's interesting. So let's ask this question, because this is something that I think is interesting too. For most of these mobile home parks, and again, this is a world that I know a few people that are like really versed in mobile home parks, but it's like a lot of people are not. They just kind of know about it. And of course, there's it's not the most popular thing at like a cocktail party to be like, what do you do? Oh, I own mobile home park. I feel like there's an idea too, like the more sexy a business is, like I own a winery or I run horse racing or whatever. You're like, oh, wow. But or I own a restaurant, like the worse the business actually is, like the lower the cash flow. But sometimes like unsexy businesses, like, okay, I own a trash collection company, or I own a mobile home park. Like they're great in cash flow, or I own a plumbing company. But I was going to ask you on this, obviously that's just kind of a side note, but when it comes to pouring more lots on more areas, can you just kind of pour wherever you want? Like let's say you have a 5 acre area, and you've got 3 acres that have units on them. Can you just kind of go and pour more? Is it kind of just depending on the local jurisdiction? Is it typically pretty difficult to get the ability to expand the park within the limits?
Yeah, I think that's one of the strong points of mobile home parks, is that the zoning is pretty limited and it's pretty restrictive in most states, right? There's some states that are more friendly, but it's very hard to get a new park developed or to add on lots to an existing park because, there's a few different reasons. One is there's this NIMBY, right, which is not in my backyard, right? If there's a brand new subdivision next door and there's a vacant lot and somebody wants to build a mobile home park there, all of the neighbors are gonna, they're gonna think that the trailer park is gonna be 8 Mile and it's gonna cause the value of their homes to go down. So they all show up at the city hall and they vote against it. There's also some economic reasons, right? Where in a typical mobile home park, if you have 2 kids in one of the trailers, the tax revenue will be less than the costs of putting those kids through public school, right? It costs around $12,000 a year to put one child through public schooling. The taxes on a mobile home are typically only a couple $100 a year, similar to what you pay at the DMV for your car registration, because it is a personal property. It's not attached to the real estate. So it can be a loss leader for municipalities. And so for that reason, plus others, including just kind of the stigma around low income housing, it's harder to get those approved.
Let me ask you a question. So this is really interesting to me. I think I've shared this quite a bit on this show in different places on our panels. I shared it actually the panel we did together, which was a really great panel. If you haven't watched it, we actually have it on the YouTube channel. It's about mobile home park communities. But I live, near Pasadena in LA, and I've got this project that I mentioned to you where we're doing, it's like a off-site built, right? So prefabricated or manufactured home. People hear manufactured, they think mobile homes, but this is a high-end thing that's got, quartz countertops and backsplashes and high-end appliances, and you walk in and there's a wow effect. You really walk in and you have a wow effect. Do you think that there is more ability for these manufactured communities, for say somebody builds a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot home on a lot in a whole subdivision or a whole area? Do you think there's a little more appetite for something like that if it's done in the right way versus, hey, we're doing, metal boxes from 50 years ago?
I think it's going to come down to affordability, Bronson. I think what you're describing definitely would fit it would fit a mold that's needed, right? We just need housing in general, right? So that the higher end housing is needed, but also the bottom of the barrel housing that's not subsidized by the government is where we're really lacking, right? And we just haven't kept up because there hasn't been as much development, right, of new mobile home parks, of new low income housing in most markets, because it makes more money to build grade A luxury stuff, right? When you're a developer and you're building a multifamily complex, you're going to build the affordable stuff and maybe make a couple $100 a unit a month, or are you going to build the bigger stuff that just has more margin? So I think that's been part of the problem is it just hasn't made sense from a number standpoint. So I do think that manufactured housing and the factory built, efficiencies matter. And I think that if we can pass that down to, the lower tier income levels, that would be a really awesome solution from not only an investor standpoint, but also just a general society standpoint.
Yeah, so kind of going into areas, maybe not doing the high-end stuff, but just doing stuff that's nice. You'd go in, it's nice enough. It's not huge. Maybe it's 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, and it doesn't have to pop. It's just got to be affordable. It's got to be nice enough, and that really is a big need. Especially, I think in the big markets, obviously, multifamily is a big push because of just the density. But in a lot of other areas that are growing, it's like having places that are nice. And a lot of times you wouldn't know. You're in a community that's manufactured versus not. If it's done right, it could be done very, very well. What are some other trends that you're seeing when it comes to mobile home parks? Obviously, the regulations you mentioned, but anything else that you're seeing just that's on the horizon of like, hey, here's something I'm paying attention to, or here's some other things that you're looking into as an investor or as a thought leader in this space?
Yeah, I think each state is different, right? And making sure you know which states you're looking at and understanding the regulations that are coming out is going to be number one, because that is changing literally every month. There's new bills that are passing and so forth. So I think that's important. Also the financing that's available, right? There's these agency lenders, which have historically offered the best debt in the space, identifying what they're looking for because their criterias have been changing. Like we were recently doing a $10 million refinance on a mobile home community in Detroit, Michigan. It's 166 units. And about halfway through the refinance, they came out and said, hey, we're going to need to know the ages that these homes were manufactured, all 166 of them. And that was new. We'd never been asked that before. And so we, went to work trying to get the years of manufacture for all of these. And then we found out that literally Fannie was changing their criteria halfway through the loan process to say, hey, we will not count the income from homes that are manufactured pre-1976. We're not going to count the full income from those homes because that was a pivotal year in manufactured housing where there's pre-HUD homes. They don't have a HUD tag on the exterior of the home, and HUD basically came out with these new standards of how these houses should be built, which was good overall. But to know that the financing was changing just like that is eye-opening, and a newer investor that's just coming into the space might not know to check for those things.
Yeah, we just had this happen. Actually, this build I'm doing in Altadena, they were going to do a certain type of loan. It was a Fannie loan, and this was just 2 units on one property. It's about a half acre, but about halfway through the process, they basically gave us a pre-approval letter, and they said, "Oh, we need this other bit of information." And then they were same thing. They kind of looked at certain income that was coming from certain sources, and said, "Well, this doesn't qualify anymore." So some of the stuff is interesting with lenders. Of course, the lenders hold a lot of power, and of course, when you have a good relationship, it kind of opens up doors. It opens up doors for you. So. What are you seeing right now as far as, you've been doing this for quite a while. You've been doing this for quite a number of years. Obviously, rates have stayed elevated for longer. There's some speculations rates may go even higher. A lot of the, multifamily, we saw a lot of pain there, a lot of other different, commercial assets. It seems like mobile homes have done pretty well. Is there, what do you think? Obviously, if rates come down, that's beneficial to people that own assets such as mobile home parks. Do you have any thoughts on rates going up, going down? Does that affect you a lot? Is it just business as usual unless they go up really sharply, or how does that affect what you're doing in mobile homes?
Yeah, it definitely affects us, right? As commercial property owners, and our ability to, recapture the equity that we put in, right? And pulling that out. Our model is a long-term hold. So we go in, we try to add a lot of value within the first 5 years, and then pull out that equity, to return to our investors, and then continue to add value. And we keep our investors in the game even after we pay them their money back plus a good return. So it hurts our ability when we have interest pricing that goes up. But I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball of what the future holds. And I think whenever we're underwriting a deal, we try to be as conservative as possible and not assume that rates are going to go back down to, the pre-COVID levels and, back to the heyday.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of mom and pop ownership within mobile home parks, or that's kind of the majority, right? This is the least owned institutional asset class as far as commercial real estate. Do you think that for someone to really operate these well, if you're not like you guys in multiple states and things, does it take somebody to kind of be boots on the ground to manage? Like if I'm in LA and I own something in the Midwest, how difficult would that be for me to manage? And would it be really important that I have someone on site to be doing kind of the day-to-day management of that?
I think it's very important. I think that's one of the ways we've kind of stood out and had success, is being very hands-on with our management. There's a statistic that goes around that, mobile home parks just behind self-storage have the lowest default rate out of all commercial real estate. But what they don't back that up with is that when a mobile home park starts to go bad, it goes down really fast, right? Because the occupancy goes down, the property condition goes down, and so you really have to be hands-on, right? This is affordable housing. You need to stay on your delinquency and stay on your occupancy. And when you're not there, and you're trying to do everything through another person or through someone that's maybe part-time, it can be very difficult. So we're big advocates of having someone on site that's your eyes and ears and really giving you a good picture of what's happening in that community.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you find good managers? I think that's one issue for property management in general. Like, how do you find a good manager, especially for a mobile home park?
We've been super blessed within mobile home parks. We have this little captive audience, right? That just happens, typically when we're going through a park in due diligence, we always look for the person with the nicest home and has the nicest lot and has the nicest landscaping. And then that's the first person we approach. And it usually turns out that usually the people that live there are older and they're on Social Security, they have fixed income, and they're home all day. So they're not leaving to go to another job. And so, if the community gets nicer, the value of their home goes up. So they're incentivized to want the community to be better. And usually that person, from my experience, kind of enjoys being the manager, being the queen bee, and being able to facilitate trying to clean the park up, and they have a vested interest, which we really like.
That's great. I hadn't heard of that before. The idea of going to the nicest mobile home, but and you probably just give them a discount on their rent or something like that.
Pay them a fair wage. They're worth their weight in gold. A good on-site manager is literally worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, and this is somebody, like you said, they're really invested because they live there, so they're in equity. It's almost like you're giving them equity because they have a direct, idea of if this park gets better, like my living situation gets better, the neighbors get better, and they actually have authority then to start doing something about it. If something starts going downhill, or they probably know all the problem areas in the place, and they're like, let's get these guys out of here or whatever, and they'll know. So that's super valuable.
And all of our on-site managers get a net cash flow bonus, and they're all on a monthly P&L review meeting. So they're seeing dollar for dollar where we're spending our money, and they're advocating, right, to help save and see if there's new ideas to get the landscaping done, get the snow removal done for cheaper, and you name it. So it helps when we're all on the same team.
That's great. That seems like a really great opportunity for someone who's in that situation, who's just trying to kind of live things out and get a little more income and make it a little more comfortable, which is great. Do you think we'll ever go back to? I know it's crazy how like back in the day, I think it was like the 80s. The 80s, it was like 60% of new homes were manufactured. And I think it was the night. I think it was the 80s was like the heyday. I think the 70s was pretty high. The 80s was very high. It was like 50, 60%. And then just kind of went down after that. But do you think we'll ever get back to a place where we are making a lot more manufactured homes, or there's kind of a new product that's out there? You think of everything's made in a factory now. You got cars, you got all the things that we use. Everything really except for homes now is really made in a factory. So do you think that ever will become standard? I heard places like Sweden. I think, were you sharing this? Sweden's like 90% is made in a factory.
Over 80%. Yeah, over 80% of their homes, and not just homes, but their commercial buildings are being built in factories and then assembled on site. So I hope so. I think that's what the future holds. I think it just makes way more sense, right? If you're able to construct everything on an assembly line, just like you are, the Ford assembly line, you're able to make a car and have less waste. It's going to add more value. So I think that it honestly, construction, and if you think about site-built houses, it's one of those things that hasn't kept up with the efficiencies of technology, especially the last 20 years, right? I live in a neighborhood and they just built a house down the street from me, and every week they were dumping this 40 cubic yard dumpster full of just random debris and boxes and just waste, right? And when they build a mobile home in a factory, there's like one trash can, one like 90 cubic yard trash, one little trash can, right? That I can put out, every week and they pick up worth of waste. It's just so much more efficient. It's more green. And I think, I hope it will go that way. Obviously, also a lot of the new manufactured homes, you'd be astonished, Bronson, at, if you go to one of the home shows, they are modern, they are energy efficient. They don't look like the stigma mobile home. They don't look like a trailer home. They look absolutely amazing, and it's really awesome what's available. But it's the land piece that's been so expensive, especially in those big metros. It's the land and the utility hookups and those type of things that are hard to, it's really hard for most Americans to afford.
Yeah, that's it. The land is really the expensive part. But, it really is amazing how, I feel like as an investor, this gives a couple advantages. Right? We're trying to provide housing for people. I can build for about half the cost as far as the actual build costs, and it can do it about twice as fast or 3 times as fast. So hopefully within 6 months, I should be, start to finish, permits to actually being done with building. And that's way, way faster than doing something stick built. It can take you, it's 22 subcontractors versus you need just a couple, right? You need a GC to put your foundation. You need a stick built garage. You need some electrical and things like that. But that stuff's just kind of set up and they hook everything up on site, as you've seen, I'm sure. I guess let's just ask a little bit more about you, the person. I think you're a very interesting person, Andrew. What did you do before you were part of the Keel team doing mobile homes? Obviously, you've had kind of a past life and done other things. What did you do before?
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Bronson. And in another life, I was a sales manager. We sold websites and branding packages to real estate agents, and that's actually how I got my interest for commercial real estate, was talking to different commercial brokers and things like that. And then after that, on the side of my W-2, I started flipping houses, and then eventually left my job to flip houses and do what's called Lonnie deals full time. Are you familiar with Lonnie Scruggs at all? Have you ever heard of?
No, and I think you mentioned earlier, but no, I haven't. Give us the background on Lonnie.
Yeah, so he wrote this book, Deals on Wheels, and he basically was, the first investor teaching people to invest in mobile homes, not the parks, but just the individual mobile home trailers themselves, buying them in other people's parks and then fixing them up and selling them on contract to an end buyer, an end owner. And so I, was wholesaling and had the We Buy Houses signs all over Orlando, and I got a lead for 2 mobile homes up in Ocala. The guy just wanted to get rid of them, so I went up and bought these and then got on YouTube and typed in, how do I make money with mobile homes? And Lonnie Scruggs popped up, and it was a whole course on doing Lonnie deals and creating Mailbox Money through his Deals on Wheels methodology. And so I did that on about 19 houses after those 2 that I bought, and it was able to fully offset my monthly expenses. And so that really helped me get out of the rat race and really focus on getting into mobile home parks. That's actually how I met the park owner I met the park owner of a park where I
that.
bought some homes, and then he kind of took me under his wing and taught me how to syndicate and raise money for buying the entire community. So
wow, so that's amazing. So so this Lonnie deal idea. So you basically bought these mobile homes, and you hauled them away, or did you leave them on the site and you fixed them up and then
left them where they are. Yeah, I just get the
title, fix
title.
them. Yeah,
Bought them in distressed situations.
just fixed them up and resold them.
Fixed them up, got the debris out of there, cleaned them out, and then resold them and worked with the park to make sure that person was background checked and would actually be qualified to live in that park. And then they would pay lot rent to the park, and they'd pay me a home payment every month. And I didn't have any repairs and maintenance, right, because they were buying it.
Yeah.
And so I was able to get 19 of those going at one time.
Wow.
And it really compounded.
That's amazing. It's amazing too, if you're willing to do the work, you're willing to do what other people aren't willing to do and hustle a bit, it's amazing what opens up. And so I think that for anybody listening, it's like with mobile homes, just like for you discovered something, you discovered, hey, here's this new way that I could make some money doing this. And you ended up getting 19 of these going, and that created quite a bit of, like you said, income to cover your living expenses or cover what you were making in your job. And so that's where like I had 2-3 years of hustle, and then I got to a place where it actually started to cover it was even more than it covered what I was making before. So I made that switch, right? So I think that's the kind of way to do it. But a lot of people think like, oh, I just don't know what to do. But it comes from like poking around and trying different things. What other things did you try? There's some other things you kind of tried about that time, or was that kind of the first thing you tried? Yeah, tell me.
Oh, I got into property preservation. If you remember back in like 2010, there was a lot of foreclosed houses down in Florida. And a buddy of mine had got into like changing locks and, doing these QAs of these masses of foreclosed houses, going around, securing them, doing trash outs, and preserving them. And I did a ton of those, worked as for these asset managers that manage these pools of foreclosed houses. And made some money, but it started to dry up. It was really, in the peak was 2010, but by 2013, the number of opportunities, the number of work orders went way down. And so I did that. I actually sold Christmas trees. That was one of my first. I set up a tent in a parking lot of a
Keel's
shopping
Christmas
plaza.
trees. I love it.
Yeah, and we just made all sorts of mistakes. We didn't even make money on the Christmas trees thing. We had a whole.
You were like Chevy Chase with like the Christmas hat on, or the tree hat on, or
yes,
the
uncle. Yeah. But we just tried different things, different entrepreneurial things on the side of my W-2. Just always had that in me. My dad was an entrepreneur and bought and sold businesses growing up, so always had that itch. And the mobile home thing really took off.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I love that you have obviously been doing this for quite a while now, but a lot of people like really, probably listeners would just say, I don't know what I need to do, whatever. And I have a very similar story to this. I tried a lot of things. I used to take Friday afternoons and I would just go to Starbucks and I would ideate on all the different businesses I could start. And I got pretty far down the road on a couple of them. One was a mail order like night guard or like a mouth guard for grinding business, because you pay $400 for these things. Like, could you automate that or get things with a lab? And then I got down finally. I was like, I just wasn't worth the brain damage to do it. But I was like, okay, that seems interesting. So I think the idea of being willing to recreate yourself and try new things is so important. And most of the things, even in my business now, I don't know if you feel this way, most of the new things I try in my business, they don't work, but then I'll come across something that works. An example of this is we, are always looking for new investors, for new leads for our business. And we usually get, maybe a few hundred leads a quarter or something like that. We did something the last 6 months where we got over 2,000 leads in a quarter, 2 new leads, right? And how we did it was through doing these investor panels, right? We created a couple things that are different about that. So now we're doing more of those. We're ramping it up. So it's interesting how you try different things, you find what works, and you listen to other people and you say, oh, this worked for them. Maybe I should do something like this as well. Or I should learn from, Andrew's story and go do the Lonnie Keel's deals and go look there, or not Lonnie. I just put you together at Lonnie Scruggs deals. And so maybe it'd be Lonnie Keel's, maybe you start your own. So, but I just want to say, I really appreciate that about you. So, I was just going to ask Andrew, this has been an amazing interview. You have a lot of great value to add, a lot of things that you're doing that are awesome. How can people follow you, hear about your deals, invest with you? I know you got an educational podcast. Talk about how people can follow what you're doing and get in touch.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, Bronson, and thanks for having me. The best way to get a hold of me would be on our website. That's just keelteam.com, KEEL team, TEAM.com. I have a free resource on there for interested passive investors. It's a free ebook. You just type in your email address and you get that. Talks about the top things that passive investors need to know when investing in the mobile home park asset class.
I love it. I love it. Well, Andrew, sit tight just a sec. I'm going to give some comments at the end here of the show. So to our listener, just really want to encourage you. I think what I really took away from this episode was just the importance of being able to reinvent yourself, to be willing to try new things. And a lot of times, I call them low risk experiments, right? You try something and it doesn't work. And so a lot of very successful people will try many, many things, and they'll come across something as, oh, this may actually work. And then they test it and it works, and it becomes something that becomes their business. So if you're thinking of starting a business, the best way is don't sell everything and burn the boats and whatever. Maybe just start a side hustle and try some different things. And maybe for a little while, you say, instead of working 40 hours at my job, and we're doing another 20 hours on the side, and just see if that business has legs and really go for it, and you really see where it goes. If you want to be more passive, you're somebody who's more like, hey, I'm trying to shut it down, then you need to get on, get into some of these investment deals. Andrew's got some great deals. We have our own investor club that we do with some really unique deals. If you're not on our list, check out the link below, or you can go to bronsonequity.com/join, and we'd love to add you to our deal list. So appreciate you joining us today, being a part of this show. I thought this was amazing. And just as always, keep educating yourself. The best investment you make is in your own education. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Mailbox Money Show. Thanks, everyone. You've been listening to the Mailbox Money Podcast. For more free resources, articles, and videos, go to bronsonequity.com. There you can download your copy of the special report, The Single Best Investment Strategy During and After a Pandemic. None of the information shared here is an offer to buy a specific investment, and this is for educational purposes only. Consult your financial, legal, and tax professionals and use your own common sense before making any investment decisions. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time for more Mailbox Money.